What is up, Steelers Nation? Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. I'm Noah Strackmine, joined always by my man in the corner, producer Nick Belsky. Find us on youtube.com/All Steelers Talkers. Subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. The Pittsburgh Steelers, they're 8-3. And let me tell you, I wouldn't be this fired up, wouldn't be this excited to be on a podcast this morning if it wasn't for the chaos that came with this game, came after this game, and really shapes the future of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I think that's what has me jazzed up on this Friday morning. The Pittsburgh Steelers fall to I almost said the Baltimore Ravens, the Cleveland Browns, 24-19 in a game that was had a little bit of snow, tiny bit of snow. For those watching at home, probably saw less of this game than I did in attendance, but it was still an AFC North showdown, a brawl at First Energy Stadium. It was a way to welcome the first snow of the season. And well, it came with all the drama that you could possibly imagine near the end of this one. We'll dive into our reactions. I mean, the headline that is circulating the internet and will continue to circulate the internet, George Pickens, Myles Garrett with some just wild moments after this ball game that it kind of makes you shake your head a little bit. And then obviously the Russell Wilson situation, where the Pittsburgh Steelers go from here, and answering the big question of whether or not the magic has dispersed after 4 games. Nick, it's gross and nasty in Cleveland. I love the city of Cleveland. It sucks that they have a crappy football team. It sucks that I don't like their crappy football team, but I like the city of Cleveland. Like, they got great Little Italy. They got good food. They probably have good music. The Creed's here tonight. I mean, it's city of Cleveland's popping. Got a bad football team. And driving back last night in the snow was pretty cool. But again, would have been cooler if I knew this morning we were getting to talk about a Victory Friday. That being said, how you feeling, my friend?
Yeah, I want to put on my Weather Channel cap for a second and say there was officially a smidgen of snow on that field last night. But, you could ask George Pickens. That made a major difference. You could ask most anybody else, and they'll say, well, both teams had to play in it, like Cam Hayward said last night. But no, I'm all right. I told you before the show, it was just a reminder. The second the ball was kicked off, it was a reminder of, man, I really hate Thursday night football. And I don't know what it is, because you would think that Monday night football would be just as bad. But something about Monday night football isn't, right? And we said all week, oh, it's nice that we have a game to look forward to in 2 days. That's crazy. It's fun, especially coming off a big win. But the second the ball is kicked off, you're just like, this ain't it, pal. This ain't it. And I learned that again last night. And of course, it was made worse by the fact that the Pittsburgh Steelers showed up in the fashion they did against a 2-8, now 3-8 Cleveland Browns team.
Yeah. And I mean, just overall, a game that from start to finish was sloppy. I think we were, 2-3 drives in, and I'm preparing all right, let's start to map out is the Russell Wilson magic gone? And let's maybe like save some face and try to explain every integral part of this, because, and we'll dive into it, but it's much more than just, is Russ not it anymore? It goes much deeper than that. Mm-hmm. And how do you fix it? Obviously, because this wasn't one game. Excuse me. This wasn't one game. This was 2 games, really the beginning of 3 games with Washington, and what comes next, and can you turn it around? I think there are a lot of questions that the Pittsburgh Steelers have right now, and I was trying very hard to break that down, and it took me all of 2 drives to start to realize, okay, it's time to break it down. It's time to really give it to everybody and explain what is going on. But we'll start with the news that, oh man, dude, I'll set the scene here. I'm sitting in the press box talking to KDK's Richie Walsh. Okay. He's sitting next to me in the press box, and he asks me, he goes, what do the Steelers do in the NFL draft next year? And I said, I don't know. I think they go defensive line early. And he said, what about a wide receiver? I said, yeah, but I also think that you might make a splash in free agency if you're the Steelers. and then go and hope Roman is good. And he said, oh, so you extend George. And I said, yeah, I would imagine they extend George. George is seeming to turn a page, turn a chapter here. That was at like the 6-minute mark of the fourth quarter. By the end of the game, my mind went, yep, all right, well, this is possibly George's last season with the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's where we are. Because you could fight guys. That's totally fine. And for those of you who aren't aware of what's going on, George Pickens decided to jump into some extracurriculars during the final moments of the Pittsburgh Steelers game against the Cleveland Browns. And, well, essentially lost the game because he was not paying attention. Not that he was the only part that lost the Pittsburgh Steelers the game. He was actually a very small part that lost the Pittsburgh Steelers the game. But in the last moments, a game that is very much so still in hand for the Steelers, that they have one final shot, throw it up to the end zone. Guess what? You have this guy named George Pickens. And if there are any amount of receivers in the NFL, if there is a list of guys that you would trust in that moment, George Pickens is probably on that list. George Pickens decided that he wasn't even trying. Before Russell Wilson threw the football up in the air, George Pickens was out of the back of the end zone throwing punches at Cleveland Browns Greg Newsome. And you could say that was Greg. If it was, fantastic job by him. Because just like they would do in the NHL, he was told, go take away the team's best player. And, well, he did it. The enforcer won. George Pickens fights at the end of the game, says it's nothing afterwards, calls the Cleveland Browns not very good. The Cleveland Browns come back with their own back and forth here. And just to make sure that we get everything perfect, this is according to Pittsburgh Sports Now's, Steelers Now's, Alan Saunders. Conditions played a huge part in today's game. I don't really think the Cleveland Browns are a good team at all. The conditions kind of saved them. Well, that came with Cleveland Browns players throughout the locker room saying that George Pickens is a fake tough guy and that George Pickens is somebody that they do not respect and that he wasn't making a play. Greg Newsome tweeted it out after the game, and I have a lot of thoughts because this is not the first time. It won't be the last time. Every moment that you think George Pickens has taken a step forward, he takes a step back, sometimes 2 steps back. And where we stand currently, the Pittsburgh Steelers have a massive issue. That issue is, well, George Pickens, because their superstar wide receiver, the guy that they traded away Deontay Johnson because of, the guy that they feel comfortable with Van Jefferson and Calvin Austin as the number 2s because of, the guy that they plan to pay this coming offseason like a superstar wide receiver, is their biggest problem character-wise on the entire roster, and continues to show that he is a character problem that, well, in tough moments, folds. And that's the biggest issue, is if you were going to be an issue and throw stuff on the sidelines and get pissed off when your team is losing, like many wide receivers do, like many players do, no worries. You know what I mean? I think sometimes we over-dramatize things in that department. If George Pickens came to the sideline, slammed his helmet down, freaked out to everybody, and went into the locker room, you'd get a lot of people talking smack. But you want to know what would really be the case here? Is that George Pickens was just part of a brutal loss to a 2-win football team, now a 3-win football team, ended a 5-game winning streak, and his offense is failing him. That's okay. But instead, you gave up before the game ended because you decided that you were going to fist fight and not try to win a game. And that is when it becomes a massive issue. George Pickens, in my eyes, is a problem. He's been a problem. I have said this before. I have gotten backlash before. I've gotten backlash from Pickens before about saying that, well, the drama is here and it is starting. I'll ask you your opinion. What do you say with George Pickens, where we currently stand?
Yeah, George getting into that altercation, I think we'll call it, because I think Greg Newsome also was kind of making sure that he got George Pickens out of the game, as you mentioned on that final play. I don't think that is anywhere close to their biggest problem right now. Yeah, it is a problem, and it's a problem that they've been dealing with really since the guy was drafted. But I don't think that you look at last night's game and that should be the main takeaway. I think I'm more concerned with George specifically about the fact that as soon as it started to snow, he was a non-factor in the game. I'm less worried about his, immaturity on that last play. Yes, would you have liked him to be there? Yes. Was he probably the guy that should have been in the middle because you looked at it and it was a weird shell where there was one player on the left of the ball, one player on the right of the ball for the Steelers, and one player behind who was supposed to be underneath? That was George Pickens. He was supposed to be the guy going up to make the play. And that's unfortunate. And you would have to say, well, listen, you need to be there. But at the same time, it's called a Hail Mary for a reason. You put yourself in a situation where you needed to throw up a less than 50-50 ball to win a football game. I'm more concerned about the fact that when the weather conditions started, it affected everybody, but it affected George Pickens more than pretty much everybody else on that field. He was a non-factor, and he wanted a lot of those pass interference calls. And I'll say this, they weren't being called a lot on either side. There was not a lot of pass interference calls. So it's not all on George, but I'm more concerned with the fact that he was a non-factor whenever the weather started getting bad than I am about his immaturity on one final play, because that's nothing new. That's something we've seen, and I'm not making a mountain out of a molehill with something like that. I'm more concerned about the fact that for the entire second half, whenever the snow was coming down in bunches, George Pickens disappeared.
I agree with you, but I don't agree with you. And I could see that the comment section doesn't agree with me. But when that is supposed to be your guy, where is the line? Like, what's the line? You know what I mean? If Newsome hit him first, okay, I get that. Okay, no penalties called. What are we doing here? You got to be better than that. The refs stunk last night. The refs have stunk all season. This. I mean, the NFL refs continue to get worse. They are a growing problem in the NFL, obviously. I mean, but is that just okay? Like, is that what we've come to? Is that it's just okay for Pittsburgh? Because if that's the case, then it's time for a lot of other changes to happen. Mike Tomlin's got to go because he clearly does not have control of his team. And Arthur Smith does not have a game plan that is suited for his guys. I mean, where's the line? You know what I mean? If this is all acceptable, then where's the line? Whose fault could it be then in that circumstance?
No,
I get that George disappeared, but if we're just okay with brushing this stuff off, which is what it seems to be, then what goes on?
I'm not okay with brushing it off, but I'm just saying they have way more pressing issues than George Pickens' immaturity. That's all. I mean, I understand that.
I agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean,
I understand that you'd like him to be not doing any of this, but that's George Pickens. That's what you're going to deal with. What you also get is the guy in the first half. The problem is if he would have been able to do what he did in the first half throughout the entire game, you wouldn't have been in that situation, and you wouldn't have had to be worrying about discussing this right now. I think the biggest thing is he is somebody who can get taken out of game too easily. And that's more concerning to me than, well, on the final play, he lost his mind because Greg Newsome pushed him out of the back of the end zone. So he decided that he wanted to try to harken back to Georgia versus Georgia Tech and throw him through the barricade. So again, it's a problem. I'm not saying, and I'm not trying to minimize that problem. I'm saying there are problems that are far more important to this team and their success this season than George Pickens being easy to get under his skin.
Oh, I agree. And I think that is where we turn to next is what are those problems and where do you fix them? And I think there are a number of things here. First off, the game plan is just strange at times. And sometimes this season, Arthur Smith has been an absolute genius. Arthur Smith has been a guy that you see the clear adjustments. You see the clear improvement from a year ago. I get all that. At other times, Arthur Smith has been wildly poor at his job. And I like Arthur Smith. I think Arthur Smith has so much potential to be the best top 3 offensive play caller in the NFL. But there have been moments where you're just looking at it going, what are we doing? How did we get here? I mean, you look at him, we'll talk about Myles Garrett here in a moment. Myles Garrett wrecks that game last night. TJ Watt is getting double teamed or has a second blocker coming to him on literally every single play. And Dan Moore, a lot of times, is taking on Myles Garrett by himself. And that is unacceptable, to be honest. I mean, I trust Dan Moore with a lot of guys. I trust no one against Myles Garrett. Nobody. And you have to adjust. Mike Tomlin said at halftime that the plan was good. It's not schematics. It is schematics. That is where we stand with the Steelers, is that it was schematics last night. And Myles Garrett wrecked that game because the Pittsburgh Steelers failed to adjust and go out there and put somebody else on Myles that wasn't Jaylen Warren chipping or Pat Freiermuth chipping. We talked about Wednesday how you have a guy named Darnell Washington who you anticipated would be there every single play to help out, or pretty close to. He was almost never there. It was a lot of people that you wouldn't think twice to put there because you'd say, no, I'm okay. I don't want him there. I want somebody a little bit better there. It doesn't make any sense to me what the game plan was last night. What is your concern with Arthur Smith at this point? We'll talk about Russ here in a second, but Arthur Smith has been a constant back and forth between good and not good. This one was bad. Mm-hmm. No adjustments. I mean, by the time Justin Fields was done with, when he broke off that 30-yard gain, you were looking at it going, that should have never happened. Why? Because I could have sent a bunch of ducks out there and said, guess what's going to happen? Those group of ducks would have known Justin Fields is going to run the football. Mm-hmm. Because that's all they were doing. At one point, fourth down, okay? Fourth down, which was the most alarming part. 4th and 1, I believe it is. Who's the running back? Oh, Connor Hayward?
Yeah.
What are we doing here? What is the thought? What is possibly going through anybody's head on that sideline to say, you want to know who we should have on the field next to Justin Fields? Connor Hayward. I like Connor Hayward. I like who Connor Hayward is as a player. You have a guy named Najee Harris. You have a guy named Jaylen Warren. You have a guy named Cordero Patterson. But instead, you're going to line up a tight end, your third tight end, really your fourth tight end, and say, this guy is going to possibly run the football. No, he's not, dude. No, he's not. And then the 2-point conversion, which I think had less to do with this game than anything. George Pickens, again, is the best jump ball wide receiver in the NFL. But you're going to line a running back over there? Your third string, 32-year-old running back is the guy that's going up for a jump ball on a 2-point conversion? Not George Pickens, not Mike Williams, not this guy named Van Jefferson that you have all the faith in the world in, not Darnell Washington, Cordero Patterson. It just, there were questions. There have been questions. It's been a back and forth constantly. But I'll ask you, what are your thoughts on Arthur Smith, your concern level with Arthur Smith?
You initially asked me what my biggest concern is with Arthur Smith, and I want to answer that one because I feel like my biggest concern is we watched Matt Canada for 3 years that it can make an average play caller look better than he is, and I think that's what's happening right now because there have been more bad performances from Arthur Smith from a coaching perspective than there have been good performances. Now, it's not all on him. Like we say, it can be both. Both things can be true. Russ could have had a bad game. The offensive line could have had a bad game. And the coaching could have had a bad game, which is what it takes to lose to a 2-win team. But Arthur Smith last night was abysmal. There had to be some players and some coaches on that sideline knowing, hey, Connor Hayward is going to be a big feature of the Justin Fields package today. And on the first play of the game, where he completely whiffs on a block and Najee gets blown up 3 yards in the backfield, a lot of those players and coaches had to go, oh no, because we know he's not going to adjust this. Connor Hayward, you said you like what he is as a player, and I'm sorry. And I'm sure Connor's a great guy. Connor Hayward is a bad football player. He's not a good tight end.
He's bad NFL player.
He's a bad, and where are we playing right now? What are we playing right now?
NFL football. Please, nobody take that as me sitting here saying Connor Hayward should be on the Pittsburgh Steelers roster. Like, I fully understand if this was another team, he probably wouldn't have a job.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure he was great at Michigan State. This isn't Michigan State. This isn't Sparty right now. This is the NFL. And Connor Hayward, for that level, is a bad football player. To feature him as the option back in the Justin Fields package should have never left the drawing board. It should have never left the meeting room, and yet we were forced to watch it through the entire first half last night. That was one of it. The other one, and I will say this, you said the 2-point conversion, which wasn't as big of a deal. I think that was a massive deal to the outcome of this game. Because if you go up by 3, if you don't, for some reason, throw a jump ball to Cordero Patterson in a one-on-one, then on that 4th and 2, do you take the penalty or do you force them to kick it because you're up by 3?
I mean, if we're going to be honest, they should have taken
back here.
They should have rejected that penalty in the first place.
They should.
Everybody in the press box.
Again, it goes to coaching.
Yeah, everybody in the press box was sitting there saying, well, you clearly take this penalty. It's 4th down. What are you doing? Like, even in that moment, it's a 1-point game. You get a minute and 40 seconds left? Something like that.
Yeah.
Where you're like, okay, with 2 timeouts, where you're like, okay, yeah, like whatever. And then they're going to, and on top of that, they're going for it. You don't trust, you're telling me you trust your defense to hold them 2 more times for 7 yards, but you don't trust them 1 time to stop them on 2 yards? Like, that was an issue. Like, that was, and Mike Tomlin was like, oh, I thought it was this, and then it was this, and that changed my mind. What? Yeah. Like, it didn't make any sense to me, to be honest. That one's classic Mike Tomlin, but they were all classic Mike Tomlin. At the end of the first half, if you call a timeout while Cleveland has the football on 4th down, instead of sitting there and let Jameis Winston go, say huh, for 35 seconds.
Yeah.
You save 35 seconds. And guess what? Guess what they didn't use on that last drive? The timeout, that they saved for that drive. Mike Tomlin is the worst game management, the clock working head coach in the NFL. He's the best motivator the NFL has seen during his time in the NFL. He is the worst moment by moment coach the NFL has seen that has won consistently, possibly ever in the history of the NFL. And I know that's blunt, but tell me I'm wrong. Like, no, it's hard to.
It's hard to, especially after what we saw yesterday, because that was some of the masterclass of how not to win a football game.
Exactly. That's exactly what that was a classic. Like, we're going to sit here and I know I'm going to get smacked on because I always do. You know, I get it. The George Pickens drama. Some people care about it. Some people don't. I don't like players who constantly have this off the field nonsense. I hate covering it. It's way more fun to talk about the Steelers playing football games. But the second part of this, and everybody's going to talk Arthur Smith. I think Arthur Smith's a giant question mark. Tomlin, what are you doing, dude? Why can't in these moments, like a week ago, we're talking Pittsburgh Steelers contender. Monday, we're talking Pittsburgh Steelers contender. They're real. They could win a Super Bowl, the whole 9. Today, we're sitting there going, if it's Andy Reid versus Mike Tomlin's getting smoked in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. There's just no questions to it. Why? Because Mike Tomlin's going to get outcoached by a mile. Mm-hmm. If it's John Harbaugh and Mike Tomlin, Mike Tomlin's going to get outcoached. No, John Harbaugh.
I don't know if I'd go to John Harbaugh. Yeah, but still against the Steelers, I don't know if he will.
He does not coach well against the Steelers. He coaches well in the playoffs. And Chris Boswell missed a field goal last night and couldn't win them the game. And that's nothing on Boz, man. That's nothing on Boz. But it's just Mike Tomlin he's Mike Tomlin, dude. You live with the highs and you die with the lows with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Unfortunately, that low is a bar that's scary. That's definitely nerve-wracking. And then we'll talk Myles Garrett, who after the game had this to say after his 3-sack performance. Quote, like I said, I've got a lot of respect for TJ Watt, a lot of respect for all the guys over there and the edge rushers in the league. But I'm number one. That's from defender one, edge one to defensive player of the year. I'm the guy. That runs through me. There's no other person being defended or schemed or planned against like I am. Just goes to show you, you can throw it out the window. I'm going to find a way. Myles Garrett deserves all the praise in the world after last night. He wrecked that game, certainly. He was not schemed well against at all. Mike Tomlin could say whatever he wants, dude. Mike Tomlin messed up. Arthur Smith messed up big time. Big time. And Myles Garrett has been schemed against well by the Pittsburgh Steelers in the past. Dan Moore has had games against him that he clearly came out the winner. This one was not one of them. He also just kind of sounds really soft. And I know Myles Garrett would eat me for lunch, pal. It would take no effort at all for him to flick me into a billion. But, I mean, sometimes if you don't say anything at all, you sound way better. And sometimes you sound like the guy who's talking way too much to the wrong people because you're not talking during the game. You're not talking your smack to Russell Wilson or Dan Moore Jr. or Najee Harris or whoever, Mike Tomlin afterwards. You're talking to a reporter in the middle of the field after the game, letting the NFL know, hey, I am that guy, when up until today, you weren't that guy this season. And at the same time, like, maybe it sounds better if you just don't talk at all.
I mean, we talked about this briefly before we jumped on here. I'm of the belief, and it might be my background. Obviously, most people know that I come from a background of playing and watching and covering hockey. If you perform the way Myles Garrett performed last night, you have carte blanche to talk your talk. And that's what he went out there and did. And I understand sometimes the coolest guys are the ones that don't look at the explosion, but Myles Garrett last night blew up the Steelers offense. And I think because of that, he can say whatever he wants, and you can't really refute it because he blew up Dan Moore. No. He blew up Russell Wilson. He blew up that game because he forced that fumble that caused 3 points in a game that ended very close. So again, does it sound a little bit weird coming from a guy on a 3-8 team? Yes, but he showed earlier in the week that right now he's in business for himself. Yeah, if it helps the team, that's great. But that's the difference between him and TJ Watt. Is TJ said, I just want the Steelers to win. Myles Garrett said, I am the guy. And that's all he wanted to prove last night. He could have cared less if the Browns won. I'm sure he's happy they did. But I think that at the end of the day, if you blow up a game the way you did, then right after the game, yeah, if you want to talk, you can talk. I can't get on the guy because he was that guy last night.
I'm not a talker, man. If TJ Watt did something like that, what would be your reaction?
I would be happy because that's the first time TJ Watt had ever done that in his entire 30-year existence, because he is that cut and dry, built out of a public relations mold of this is a superstar, and that's exactly what you want as a team. But Myles Garrett isn't that, and it's worked for him. So if TJ did it, it'd be vastly out of character. But if he did it after a 3-sack performance, that'd be great. Not a 2-tackle for loss. Hey, you stopped Nick Chubb a couple times and then were a non-factor the rest of the time type of performance like we saw from TJ last night. And don't get me wrong, I don't want to hate on TJ, but in a matchup of two of the best, TJ didn't show up. Myles did, and some of that is coaching, some of that is scheme. But point blank and simple, if you watched that game last night, you came away with the impression that Myles Garrett had the far better game. And because of that, I think it's all right that he talked because, he earned that right whenever he blew up the game.
Yeah, he did have the far better game. I don't think I would agree with he played better. I don't think I would agree with that. I think the Steelers kept TJ Watt away from some very advantageous situations, and that hurt TJ Watt. I think that the Steelers gave Myles Garrett much more opportunity than the Browns gave TJ Watt. And I think Mike Tomlin gave Myles Garrett way more opportunity than Mike Tomlin gave TJ Watt in that instance. I mean, there was a right guard starting at left tackle. How many times did you see TJ Watt play the left side?
Well,
0.
That is another conversation that needs to be had because I thought about that as well. Not that Nick Herbig didn't make a play, but can we?
I don't care if Nick Herbig makes plays. TJ Watt makes 10 of them.
One of the biggest plays of the game, where did Myles Garrett come from? straight up the middle on Zach Frazier in a one-on-one.
Yes. Yes. It's time for TJ Watt to move. It's time for TJ Watt to move. That is very clear. And in these situations, it is even more clear that it's time for TJ Watt to move. All right. Everybody's got a lot of questions. We're going to dive into them. We're going to continue to keep talking Pittsburgh Steelers, Baltimore. Yeah, I keep saying the Baltimore Ravens, Cleveland Browns. But first, we got a quick word from our boys over at Rocket Money.
Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. See all of your subscriptions in one place and know exactly where your money is going. And for any that you don't want anymore, Rocket Money can help you cancel them with just a few taps. Rocket Money's dashboard gives you a clear view of your expenses across all accounts, easily creates a personalized budget with custom categories to help keep your spending on track, and sees your monthly spending trends in each category to know exactly where your money is going. Get alerts if your bills increase in price, there's unusual spending activity, or if you're close to going over your budget. And the new goals feature automatically saves money for you without you even having to think about it. Whether your goal is to pay off your credit card debt, put away money for a house, or just build your savings, Rocket Money makes it easy. Rocket Money will even try to negotiate lower bills for you, sometimes up to 20%. They automatically scan your bills to find opportunities to save. Then you can ask them to negotiate for you. They'll deal with customer service. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions. They could save members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's features. Stop wasting money on things you don't use. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions by going to rocketmoney.com/allsteelers. That's rocketmoney.com/allsteelers. rocketmoney.com/allsteelers.
All right. So I got a question
Okay.
before we dive into the questions, just to round out this TJ Watt, Myles Garrett talk, because I just saw it as I was doing a quick internet scroll. Kyle Brandt of Good Morning Football says TJ Watt has officially lost Defensive Player of the Year.
Okay.
Do you feel the same?
No. And I think that it's taken us too long to get to this, but we've seen this story before. We saw it twice last year, and the Pittsburgh Steelers still made the playoffs and still gave the Buffalo Bills a run for their money. The Steelers are prone to losing these games. So while, yes, there are parts of this game that are alarming, there are problems that do need fixed, it is in Thursday Night Football, AFC North matchup on the road, and we've seen that story play out time and time again. So, no, I don't think TJ Watt lost himself Defensive Player of the Year. I think that he had a poor performance on a nationally televised game, which is going to get the talking heads talking. So, I think that there are people that have overreacted to this, and there are things that we can overreact to and have heated discussions like we have. But at the end of the day, that one game does not make a whole season. So at the end of the day, we need to remember that it is Steelers, Browns, it is AFC North, which changes some things. We do need to remember the weather is a great equalizer. I will not dispute that, but it is an equalizer. It is not something that helps one team more than it helps the other. It is just an equalizer. But I do think that with Kyle Brandt saying that, a lot of that is prisoner of the moment. And that's his job. So I'm not going after Kyle Brandt, but I do think it's a prisoner of the moment statement.
Can Mike Tomlin win Coach of the Year with losses to Cleveland and
Indianapolis
and Dallas?
I don't think he can, because as he stated before the game with Taylor Rooks, this is a, hey, how'd you get here type of thing. If you're already established, you need to have that perfect year. And there's going to be voters that look back on this game and say, man, not only did he lose that game, he mismanaged the hell out of that game. And I think that goes against him.
Yes, I agree. I don't disagree. I didn't think Mike Tomlin had much of a shot. I think last night's loss played a massive factor into him and TJ's awards. I do. I think that award people will, which I would love to meet these people. Would love to meet these people. All of them. Yeah, like he gets some of them. And I know some of them, but I would love to meet all of them. They will look at this game and they will say, well, how could I vote for TJ Watt when Myles Garrett did this over TJ Watt? And they'll get another opportunity. They'll get another opportunity in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
but I don't feel great about that opportunity.
I was going to say they did it with Myles Garrett last year because TJ Watt outperformed him in both games against the Browns, and they still went with Myles Garrett.
Last year was different. Myles Garrett was going to win it. Myles Garrett didn't need to play a game last season. He was going to win Defensive Player of the Year. That's just, we had those conversations. But I think that this year, it was more of an even playing field. And just like Mike Tomlin has to be perfect, TJ Watt had to be near perfect this season. And I think this will come back to bite him in the butt. Last thing I got for you, and then we will dive into every single question here. And this is going to be a dramatic question, okay? So just stick around for it. Okay, and give me your honest answer.
Okay.
I'm not saying that I agree with the question. I will give my answer after you give yours. Has the Russell Wilson magic run its course for the Pittsburgh Steelers? Have we seen the highs and are now experiencing the lows of Russell Wilson?
I don't think so. I think you're experiencing lows. I don't think that this is cut and dry. Oh, this is what it's going to be now. I think Russell Wilson and I think the offensive coordinator needs to go back to what was working in the first couple of games when they were saying, well, we're going to do a little bit of quick strike offense to set up the long ball. They become too much of a one-trick pony whenever they're going long ball, long ball, long ball, long ball, because in a game like last night, when the weather takes that out of the equation, you become a one-trick pony, which is why we saw Justin Fields in there way more than they probably expected to put Justin Fields in there, because they were one-dimensional and their running game became ineffective because then the Browns just started run blitzing. So what did they have to do? They had to add a dimension, and they have one on the sideline in Justin Fields. That's what they had to rely on. It gets them out of character. It gets them off rhythm. And I think that is what we saw last night. And again, the important thing is both of these poor performances came against AFC North opponents.
Yes.
Eventually you got to do it though. Like that, I will say that. Yeah. The magic hasn't run out, but eventually you have to show me that you can beat an AFC North defense. And that's what we have yet to see, because at the same time, how much of this discussion are we having if the Steelers hold it down and we say the last thing we saw out of Russell Wilson was that not moonball. I've seen some people call it a moonball, that absolute strike to Calvin Austin in the snow to put them up on a 3rd and long.
I agree.
That changes the conversation. So I don't think the magic has dissipated. I think there are certain things that need to be done schematically to get him back to what he was against the Giants and the Jets.
I agree. I think a lot of what he was against the Giants and the Jets is what he has been. It's just worked better. But I agree with you. I do agree with you. I don't think the magic has run out. I think he's getting easier to be schemed against. I think teams have more of an understanding of what is coming, which is half him and half Arthur Smith, obviously. But I do think that the first 3 games, team said, really the first 2 games, team said, oh, Russell Wilson, what are we going to get? Everybody talks about the moon ball, but Russell Wilson's still Russell Wilson, man. He could do it all. The 3rd game, I mean, he got kind of lucky. He got kind of lucky that they won that game, because that conversation would have been different. The 4th game, okay, moon ball's gone, pal. There's no moon ball. What's happening? Everybody's talking about how bad the offensive line is. It is. Okay, well, how do you adjust? You don't throw moon balls anymore. You throw shorter passes, which, again, partially on Arthur Smith, half on Arthur Smith. This one was the same thing. Was, okay, you need to do something. You need something else. You need something else. You found a beautiful pass to Pat Freiermuth on 3rd and whatever, and in a tight window. Why is there not more of that? Why are they not doing more? Why are the short passes screen passes to Darnell Washington? What are we doing here? And that's Arthur Smith. That's Arthur Smith. But that magic is through Arthur Smith and Russell Wilson. And I don't know. I don't think it's run out, obviously. I think Russ is still the guy. But 4 days ago, we were making excuses for Russ. Today, you're 2 AFC North teams in, and you could say, well, they're AFC North battles. You have to win. You have to play well in these AFC North. Ben Roethlisberger owned the Cleveland Browns. Owned them. They were there. They were his child. That's how much he owned the Cleveland Browns. Should probably have stake in the team, honestly. The Haslams should say, Ben, here's 25% for what you have done. You have to be able to win those games. You have to be able to play well in those games. And where we sit right now, I think his 2-game resume, which isn't a lot, but you only get 6. You only get 6 this season. It's not like you have a 3-year deal in front of you. You got a 1-year, 6-game prove it. The Steelers will not negotiate in season. So this is all right now. You are a third of your way through the AFC North. And you have not proven that you are an AFC North quarterback. And you need to. Because if you do not, and again, I don't think you don't even think about benching Russell Wilson. He is your best shot to win a Super Bowl. And, the Steelers are still very much so a name to watch for a Super Bowl. But if he does not prove that he is capable of winning in the AFC North and being the guy in the AFC North, I think the Steelers have a very tough decision to make this offseason about where they go at quarterback. And I think that the conversation becomes more maybe the upside of Justin Fields is worth it than what Russell Wilson was able to do, because you have to win the AFC North to get into the playoffs. That is goal 1, if you ask the Pittsburgh Steelers. And Russ is a third of his way through that and is not an AFC North quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to sit here and disagree with anything you said, because in this league, you are built to be successful through your division. And for the Steelers, unfortunately, that all came at once, right? We talked about it a lot, but it's 2 games in, and yeah, he's 1-1, but we can't give him too much credit for that win against the Baltimore Ravens, can we? So he has yet to show it. There have been mitigating circumstances in the one game, but the good thing is he has 4 more chances to kind of prove it. 2 of them coming back to back, including a revenge spot against the Browns back on home turf on December 8th. So it certainly is concerning that he hasn't been able to perform against the teams that you're going to see every year, twice a year. But again, like you said, small sample size and not the only factor, because the offensive line struggled at times. The wide receivers struggled at times where Kirk Herbstreit couldn't go 2 plays without saying, if Russ gets out of rhythm, if Russ gets out of schedule, comes out of the pocket and starts scrambling, these wide receivers seem like they don't know what to do. They don't know to go towards the ball, to come back towards the quarterback, to try to get open. So it's not all on Russ. It is a larger problem than that, which is concerning. But I do think that there is a level of concern whenever you look at Russell Wilson 2 games into his AFC North tenure and say he hasn't really stepped up to the challenge.
I agree. You need to. You got 4 more games to do so, but you need to. It will decide. You can win a Super Bowl, okay, and that changes everything. But if you go to the playoffs, you win a playoff game and you lose, and you have even if you win the AFC North and you win, if you go 5-1, okay, but you do nothing, that's a conversation to be had. And again, it's Mike Tomlin, so he makes bad, poor decisions that don't make any logical sense all the time. But this one would be tough to explain. It would be tough to explain. All right, let's dive into some questions. I know everybody's got a lot of them. If you have any, toss them in the chat. We'll end the show the same way we do every single day, by answering everything you guys want to know. Nick, I'm going to toss it to you. What do we got?
Yeah, let's kick things off with Rod, who says, Tomlin haters have been quiet all season. Welcome back. Pickens is a sore loser and is young, but he's a competitor, and we're definitely going to extend him.
I don't think definitely is a word I would use. I don't think definitely is a word I would use. I would say if I had to guess, yeah, he does get extended. But Mike Tomlin has been very open that George Pickens has attitude and character issues. He has not held back on that. And even when you ask, hey, is George getting better? He just simply says, yes, he is. And that's it. So, yes, but also maybe not. Who knows? I think there is a long season ahead, and that will decide the fate of George Pickens. I think next offseason decides the fate of George Pickens and how he approaches the final year of his contract and what that situation is. You can imagine a holdout is definitely coming. I think there are a lot of factors. Definitely is not a word I would use right now.
Let's jump over to Pittsburgh Hornets, who says, what did the Steelers need to do to get 1 yard on fourth down we can reasonably be fixed? What can reasonably be fixed by next week?
Game plan could easily be fixed. I mean, this is 2 weeks in a row where we have identified exactly how you adjust the offense, and it's shorter passes, use the middle of the field, get those guys involved, get your playmakers opportunity to catch the football. And how about, Mike Williams? Like, where the hell is Mike Williams? What are we doing here? At one point, Mike Williams, I watched it. I don't know if you guys saw it on TV. Mike Williams ran onto the field, got in the huddle, and then ran right off the field so that Van Jefferson could go on the field. Nothing good happened on that play. I mean, the miscommunication that happened last night, it's just, again, I think Van came up big with a good catch there. I think you have to start using Mike Williams. That's one thing that could be fixed. Shorter passes is a must. You have to work more of a West Coast style offense, play action style offense, get those short, quick passes going and let these guys do something with it, or don't let them do something. Like if they catch a football and they get 4 yards, that's still a 4-yard play. That's progress. You're moving in the right direction. I think that is the easiest thing to do. It helps a struggling offensive line. It helps a quarterback who's taken way too many hits and is definitely hurting. And it opens up the run game. It just changes everything. You have to go shorter passes. That's a must. The defensive side of the football, to be honest, was schemed pretty well yesterday outside of moving TJ Watt. The problem is these guys are just not playing well right now. They're just plain and simple. They are a couple good plays, couple bad plays. And for how good they are, for how good they were last week, you need to be, it's been more, this season has been more, defense has been than elite. And it started off where it was just elite. Then Dallas happened. And it was like, not so elite. And then everything that's come from there. The defense I don't think it's schematics. I think you just have to step up.
Yeah, and I think last night showed an important thing too. The defense was really good if that's not a bad Browns team. And the reason I say that is the Browns were 1 for 10 on third down, but they were just desperate. So they went for it on fourth down. And in those all or nothing situations, the Steelers came up with nothing almost every single time. In fact, I think the Browns were 4 for 4. They were on fourth down. So all for nothing, all or nothing. The Steelers came up with nothing every single time. So I don't think that the defense was necessarily horrible. I think you make one of those all or nothing plays, the game changes significantly. Also, you force 3 turnovers in the second half. So again, I just keep preaching this. It is a whole team loss last night because there were some good moments and we can't discredit that, but it's just enough mistakes, enough shooting yourself in the foot that you ended up losing that game.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, like I get that the defense is good. I'm not trying to say that they're not, but Patrick Mahomes is going to make those all or nothing plays. He's going like, that's the thing is you can't lose those. That's what defines an elite defense is you do not bend or break in those bend or break moments. You literally survive. And the Steelers that's twice this season and don't get me wrong, they've won, but that's twice this season. And they won, Baltimore was a bend or break moment. They didn't bend or break. They won. Dallas was a bend or break moment. They broke. Cleveland, bend or break moments. They lost. You have to win more than you lose those.
Yeah, you do. You do. Let's jump down to Justin. Appreciate you. Justin says, we are looking at Warren staying next year. I'm afraid Najee is just a guy. What do you think?
I think Najee has moments where he's way more than a guy. I also think there are moments where Najee's just a guy. And a lot of it depends on a lot of things. I think last night people are going to bag on the offensive line, but running the football, the offensive line was not bad. They held their ground. They didn't run much in the second half, but in the second half too. With Justin Fields on the field, that's a totally different story. But there were a lot of plays where there were holes and nobody hit the holes. I mean, I'm not putting that on the offensive line. I'm really not. Like even everybody wants to bag on these pitch plays and say, why are you pitching the football? There were pitch plays where I was like, there's a hole, my friend. That's a massive hole, actually. And if you are able to see that, you hit that hole, you get maybe 10 yards, 10 plus yards. I don't know if I'm putting that on on the offensive line as a whole. I think the offensive line struggled last night, but I think they struggled way more in the pass game than in the run game. Last night was, last night the snow obviously does not help anything when it comes to running the football. But last night was Najee was just a guy. That's all he was. He was just a guy. He has been moments where he has been a superstar in this league, and you need more of those.
Mm-hmm.
And you need it to come, in steps, in phases, in chunks. More chunks, superstar. Less chunks, average. That's what we're looking for with Najee Harris. All right, before we jump into the next question here, we got a boatload more of them, so we'll dive into all of them. We're going to take a quick break here from our boys over at the Perfect Gene.
400,000. That's how many men have rescued their nuts from stiff, unforgiving jeans, all thanks to the Perfect Gene. These jeans have enough stretch to accommodate Thanksgiving dinner and are comfy enough to wear all day watching Sunday football. Plus, even though they feel like sweatpants, they look good enough to be your go-to pants for date night. The Perfect Gene has the perfect size for everybody, and we mean everybody. They've got 6 different fits, waists running from 26 to 50 and lengths from 26 to 38, which means there are over 5,000 possible combinations of pants for you to choose from. So if you're a short king or actually 6'5", if you love a loose fit or are still in your skinny jean era, or if you're bulking up or cutting down, the Perfect Gene is the perfect option for you. For a limited time, our listeners get 15% off their first order plus free shipping at theperfectgene.nyc, or Google The Perfect Gene and use our code ALLSteelers15 for 15% off. It's finally time to stop crushing your balls in uncomfortable jeans by going to theperfectgene.nyc. Our listeners get 15% off your first order plus free shipping, free returns, and free exchanges when you use code ALLSteelers15 at checkout. That's 15% off for new customers at theperfectgene.nyc with promo code ALLSteelers15. After your purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Fuck your khakis and get the Perfect Gene.
Shout out our boys over at the Perfect Gene. All right, let's keep it going here. We got a lot of questions. If you got more of them, toss them in the chat. We'll answer as many of them as we can before we head out of here. What do we got?
Let's go to Lindsay, who says, do you think Tomlin controls the offensive calls and is holding them back at all?
No, Tomlin does not control the offensive calls. He controls the defensive calls, and you could tell when he is struggling in that department. I think he has a hefty hand in the offensive plays, but I don't think he has a hefty hand in the offensive play calls. I think Arthur Smith is struggling, my friend. I think Arthur Smith is struggling. I mean, it goes a bunch of ways. Like, you got Albert Breer last night on the broadcast saying that Arthur Smith has had to have like long, deep, tough conversations with Russ about buying in. Like, what does that mean? What are those conversations about? But you also have just bad schematics. A lot of times bad schematics, no adjustments. It's almost as if with the Justin Fields, the adjustments were super intense. And with Russell Wilson, those adjustments are almost non-existent. That's where we stand.
Let's go over to Cody Silva, who says, did Mike Tomlin let TJ Watt down last night?
Yeah, he did. He definitely did. You move TJ Watt to the left side. I don't care what the situation. I don't care how comfortable TJ Watt is. He is a defensive player of the year favorite. He is a game wrecker. He is a future Hall of Famer. You put him on the damn left side and you let him go up against the right guard who's starting at left tackle on Jameis Winston's blind side. That's what you do. The Steelers let TJ Watt down by $1 billion last night. There were times where TJ Watt would beat a blocker only to have another lineman there to block him because the Browns made sure not one guy, but 2 guys were there at all times to stop TJ Watt. I don't care if he's going to face that on the other side. Your chances of beating that first guy on the other side instead of beating Jack Conklin is way bigger, way more success rate, or way higher success rate. It didn't make any sense. The Steelers certainly let TJ Watt down last night, 100%.
Let's go to Arts World, who says, is there a reason why we don't try the tush push on 3rd and 1, 4th and 1? Why are we in shotgun?
Yeah, I mean, the Justin Fields play made no sense. It just, and it would have made sense if I would have ran the triple option with Najee Harris and Jalen Warren, where you had the initial read for the dive with Najee. You had a pitch option for Jalen Warren, and then Justin Fields could do whatever he wants. You don't know why? Because if you're going to get around the edge, awesome. But give it to Jalen, where he's got 3 more yards of space to get that 1 yard. It just would have made so much more sense to me. The tush push, I don't know why they don't try the tush push. Maybe they just don't trust their offensive line. I have no idea. I don't think they want Russ in there. It doesn't work when they usually try it. But shotgun doesn't make any sense to me, especially when you see it coming.
Let's go to Cody, who says, do you guys still think it's worth re-signing Dan Moore? Him and Broderick equal each other out now. We are starting to see the same in Dan Moore of last year.
Yes and no. Yes and no. I mean, Dan Moore last week struggled. I'll give you that one. But so is Isaac Seumalo. So did Zach Frazier. So did Mason McCormick. This week he's going up against Myles Garrett, who he shouldn't beat, and has almost no help. And when that help is there, it's the worst help that you could ask for. It's the Pat Freiermuth block. It's the Connor Hayward block. Like, what are we doing here, pal? So I wouldn't give Dan Moore a pass this week, but I don't think I'm judging his future off of this game. I'm judging Arthur Smith's future off of this game. But I think last week he had a bad game. Yes. Next week he's got to play better. He's got much less of a competition because Trey Hendrickson plays on Broderick's side. Mm-hmm. And if he wins, we go back and we feel good about Dan again and chalk it up to Myles Garrett. But I agree with you. He's got to bounce back. Let's jump over to Victor real quick, who says, can we talk about the kickoff? Shouldn't that have been a safety? Talking about the Browns muffed kickoff that ended up being just a touchback. Yeah, I think last night was a prime example of why the hybrid kickoff isn't going to last more than one season, because I don't think anybody had any understanding what the hell happened. He touched the football before it went into the end zone. In the kickoff rule, that's supposed to be a safety. But then on the broadcast, the ref is saying he didn't have possession, and that's why it wasn't a safety. So you have to have possession, and then it goes in. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me. That's not how I understood the rule. I thought that once you touched it and it went into the end zone, everybody in the press box, Pittsburgh Steelers personnel included, thought that once you touched it, it was a safety. No idea, but a prime example of why the hybrid kickoff rule is just dumb.
Yeah, I didn't know if it was because you have to be in the end zone, take it out, and then go back in. I don't. It was weird because my first thought too was, isn't that a safety? And you saw the ref kind of like pause and then just go touchback. And I was like, okay, I thought it was, but maybe that's the reason. But yeah, refereeing is bad across the board. We've said that on countless occasions.
Yes.
Let's go over to J Chap's snack reviews. It says, maybe I missed it, but if we address the defense's inability to get off the field on 3rd and long all season.
I mean, it's the defense the defense started out looking so elite and has become very unimpressive in the last couple of weeks for the names that they have. I mean, last week was awesome. It was a classic AFC North showdown, but every week around it has been very much so not impressive. I mean, and there are names, you know what I mean? Like Minkah Fitzpatrick is nowhere to be found these days. Deshaun Elliott is nowhere to be found these days. Joey Porter Jr. gets called for penalties every single game. Dante Jackson either comes up with an interception or he gives up a touchdown. I mean, it's just all over the board. It's all over the board. There is no splash outside of Nick Herbig right now is the splash. And that third down is killing killing them. I don't know what they went last night. It actually was an impressive number. I want to say it was like 1 and something.
The Steelers defense was 9 for 10, which means the Browns were only 1 for 10 on third down, but they were 4 for 4 on fourth down, which is the same thing.
On fourth down, which is the issue. Yeah, I agree. And that one was a crucial third down.
Mm-hmm. It was. Let's go over to Cecil, who says, do you think Russ throws the deep ball too often on third and short? The deep ball is not a high percentage conversion rate.
Yeah, I think so. I think Russell Wilson throws the deep ball too much all the time. Like there's just, you have one option for the deep ball. Even Van Jefferson's catch in the middle of the field on third down, which he should have got the first. That was ridiculous. But even that play, like Van Jefferson was useful in the middle of the field. Pat Freiermuth was useful in the middle of the field last night. They just don't. It needs to be more of that, less deep ball. That's not even a conversation to be had. That's where the offense is struggling the most.
Yeah, and on a pivotal third down, when you're on that last offensive drive, you bring Justin Fields in to throw the deep ball was also a interesting decision. But also, the ball was there. So make the play. I understand there was contact, but you got to make the play when it's there. Let's go over to Jeremy, who says, are we not going to talk about JPJ having the worst game of his career? He got destroyed by Jerry Jeudy.
Yeah, he did. I don't know what's going on with Joey Porter Jr., but it's last game he had a good. It's like weird to chalk up last game because you want to talk like, hey, he has been struggling except for Baltimore, but that's the entire team that's the entire defense throughout the last like 4 weeks is that guys are not playing well, and then they played well against Baltimore. So that's where Joey is right now, you know, and the thing with Joey is he's so young and has so much potential that I am less worried about him. But you can't give those plays up. Jerry Jeudy should not take over a game. He should not take over a game. He is not that guy. And Joey Porter Jr. is that guy to shut him down. He just didn't last night. And I agree with you. I think this is twice now in the last 3 weeks. The first one coming against the Commanders, where Joey Porter Jr. was clearly defeated by wide receivers. And that's not what you want out of Joey Porter Jr.
Let's jump over to Nicolo, who says, do you guys think the Steelers can stop an offense like the Lions? Be honest. And yes, I'm a Steelers fan.
No, I don't think the Steelers, if they play like the Ravens, which until proven otherwise is an enigma. That was it. That was the rare stone that was found by the Steelers. Besides that, you judge the entire season by a whole. No, they can't stop the Lions. They're not going to be able to stop the Chiefs. You know, that's just where they stand right now. Now they have the pieces to stop all of these teams. They have the guys to stop every single one of them. They could shut down Patrick Mahomes. They could shut down Josh Allen. They could shut down Jared Goff and David Montgomery and everybody else in Detroit. I mean, they could do that, but they have to play like they can do that. And early in the season, they were playing like that. Where they stand right now, they are not. And it's not like years past where you could say, well, the offense is letting them down. They're getting exhausted. No, it's just they're just not playing well enough to stop them.
Yeah, they had 1 minute of actual play time in the first quarter last night. 1 minute. It was like 13 to 1.5 or something like that. You can't use the getting tired thing. What you basically said is, can they stop them? Yes, to answer the question. They can stop the Detroit Lions. Will they? Depends on if they show up. Depends on if they show up, or if the defense that shows up against the Dallas Cowboys shows up. Because if that happens, you know, we saw what the Lions did last weekend. You might see that again. Yes. We got 2 more here. Let's start with J Chap's snack reviews. Just curious, what coach would you rather have than Tomlin? Meaning coach that's actually available.
I wouldn't rather have another coach. I would just like Mike Tomlin to be better. Like, that's the thing, is I'm very pro Mike Tomlin. I think he is a phenomenal head coach. I think he's a future Hall of Famer. Like, I am not a fire Tomlin guy. Never have been, never will be. I am just not a Mike Tomlin hater. But he has clear flaws. Everybody has clear flaws. The problem is that Mike Tomlin's clear flaws will clearly lose to Andy Reid. Mike Tomlin's clear flaws will clearly lose to the Kyle Shanahans and those, like, that's where he will struggle. And you have to get better at those. You have to. And I don't know if he could. It's been a forever thing with Mike Tomlin, but his decision making is that's the thing is people will lump together like fourth down calls that work and then that disastrous decision to accept a penalty on third down when it should have been fourth down at the end of the game, or to not call a penalty or a timeout at the first half. They are not the same. Mike Tomlin is a ballsy coach who at times does not live in his fears, and it comes back and it rewards him. That the fake punt, the prime example. That is not in the same category as not calling a timeout at the end of the first half, or accepting a penalty when you shouldn't have accepted that penalty. Like that's two totally different sides of football. Mike Tomlin's great at the ballsy side of football. He is atrocious at the game management, decision-making side of football.
Let's close it out with this one. Cecil says, when is Highsmith coming back? It helps TJ a lot when Alex is in there.
I would guess after Cincinnati is when Alex Highsmith comes back. That is my anticipation for him, what I've heard. And there really hasn't been much update, to be honest with you. It's been pretty quiet. But Alex Highsmith, if I had to guess, is coming back after Cincinnati. He'll be there for Cleveland. He'll be there for the next time they play Cleveland.
That's a wrap for today, then.
Awesome. With that said, guys, we are heading out of here. Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk. Check us out anywhere you get your podcasts. And as always, find all our work at si.com/NFL/Steelers. We will be back on Monday because it is, unfortunately, a Friday. Enjoy a beautiful weekend in the Berg.